Physical damage is an architect that's been kinda lost in modern Genshin Impact. I mean, it never was really that popular of a damage type, but it still had a few characters whose best build style was physical. People like Eula, Xinyan, Razor, and that's it. For a while, those were the only 3 characters who you'd preferably build physically. For a while, physical damage pretty much fell into obscurity, only being used for joke builds. Quite the fall from grace from 1.0 where physical damage jangling dominated. But there was hope for the physical damage meta in 4.0, when we got a brand new character. The first character since 1.5 to be mainly physical, Freminet. But sadly, he didn't do much for the physical meta. Being physical is actually what dragged him down. Because of how limited physical damage is, he couldn't do much in the current meta climate. This of course doesn't mean he's bad. I don't think anybody expected Freminet to shake up the meta because he was a 4-star and he used physical damage, but I still feel like his reception was a little unfair. But if you know me, you know I don't give a fuck about what the meta says, so I'm going to try and beat Genshin Impact using only Freminet, and see what his strengths and weaknesses really are. Here are the rules. I can only use Freminet in battle. Any puzzles that require another element can be completed with another character. No healing items in battle, no fighting enemies in co-op, and all claymores are allowed. Now let's see if you can beat Genshin Impact using only Freminet. The challenge starts with us getting Freminet, which happened all the way back when I was trying to get Zhongli for Zhongli only. Because we can't have nice things, I lost my Act 1 footage, so I'll be using footage from an unfinished challenge where I was using Freminet. First was Amber's Domain, which only had simple enemies. Next was Kaya's, which had more easy enemies, and we could actually ice bridge with Freminet. Last was Lisa's Domain, which we skipped by jumping off an invisible platform. Now we need to get to AR10 to start Act 2, and thankfully from here on out, I have all the footage I need.
Do you smell that? It's a Freminet or a good claymore weapon. Watch. Listen, Fischl, I like you, but wrong account.
Now's a good time to talk about Freminet's pros and cons. Let's start with the pros. He's cryo. Cryo application on enemies will slow them down by about 1/4, which is very useful for normal enemies. It's a little less useful on boss enemies because it can throw me off because of how used to their attacks I am, but it's fine. Freminet using mostly physical damage is also a pro, but despite what you might think. Not only is it easy to build off of, his biggest source of physical damage, his elemental skill, also uses cryo, which sort of cancels out the negatives of using physical damage. Speaking of that, it deals a lot of damage. Early on I wouldn't use it as much because I didn't fully understand how Freminet worked at the time, but now I know that it's definitely the best part about his kit. His burst makes it so he can use his elemental skill more, which means more big damage. His smallest pro is probably his Numa alignment. It's only really helpful on Gardamax because most of them in the Archon quests are Ossia aligned, but because there are plenty in Fontaine's Archon quests, it's nice to have. Now time for the cons. It's very easy for him to get hit. His attack animations are longer than usual characters, which leaves him open to attacks from enemies. Also, him mainly attacking with physical damage is not a very big problem, but it's still definitely an issue. His materials being Romaritime flowers is also annoying because you need to use Hydra on them to collect them, so the only ones that we can collect are the ones underwater. Thankfully there are plenty underwater, so it's fine. And that's all the cons I have for him. None of them are really big problems, and I feel like this character does really well on his own, at least so far. To get to AR10, we did some simple Mondstadt exploration and adventure handbook quests. This is the easiest AR grind, so there's no point in going into it. Once we reach AR10, we get a free 10 pull on standard banner.
Are you kidding me? We just got her. Why a Fischl constellation and not a Freminet constellation?
Getting Fischl on 2 back-to-back 10 pulls is just my luck. Maybe this should have been Fischl only. Now we can start Act 2. We meet the other character that gets mistakenly called a female, and then we go to Windrise to fight an Eye of the Storm, and it stood no chance once it dropped down. We steal the Holy Lyre and then meet D-Luke, who takes us to the Fatui hideout. We defeated the agent at the end of the domain before he could even get an attack out. Now we need to get 3 teardrop crystals to summon Dvalin, and first was the Ruin Guard. Because of the Ruin Guard's 70% physical resistance, I mainly used the cryo damage from my elemental skill instead of the physical damage from it. Next was the domain, and for the Pyro Abyss Mage, we let it deplete its shield in the water. The last one we got by opening a random chest. We failed to calm Dvalin, which is where Act 2 ends. Now we need to reach AR18 to start Act 3. Because we reached AR 12 while doing Act 2, we unlock commissions, which is a great source of consistent experience.
No, it's gonna be a character. At least have it be a cool one. You know what, I like Barbara.
Streaming one of my next challenges, Healers Only, has made me gain a big appreciation for Barbara. The next day, completing my commissions gets me to AR 15, which allows us to ascend our characters. Siege Queen was on the banner at the time, and because she also takes Vermintide flowers, we didn't have to walk all the way to Fontaine. You might be thinking that we have to do that either way, but once you reach AR 18, you unlock multiple teleport waypoints straight to Fontaine, so it's nice that I don't have to trek all the way to Fontaine an hour later. We could also ascend our other characters to get free standard pulls, so let's see what we get.
Doing this 10 pull and then I'm going to bed. Send me to bed happy. I'll take a claymore. I actually got a claymore? Granted, it's not very good, but it's just the fact that it's a claymore. This is a character. At least be a cool character.
It's good to meet
You know, I really like Toma, so I'll take this.
The next day I continued with Mondstadt exploration. This early on, the easiest way to get experience is through random exploration, like opening up the map and getting chests. As a result, I don't have much to talk about for this AR grind. I did do Kai's and Amber's story quests, and finally got Kaveh on a reroll account, so Kaveh only will be on the table. Shortly after completing Amber's story quest, we reached AR 18, which meant we could start Act 3. The first fight is against a Hydro Abyss Mage and some Hilichurls. Because Freminet is cryo, he can freeze the Abyss Mage, but he usually immediately shatters them right after, so we don't really get the benefits from it. Still easy though. Inside a Stormterror's lair, we need to trigger 3 light actuators, and one of them is guarded by a Pyro Abyss Mage and 2 Summachurls. What I've noticed is that cryo definitely doesn't do as much as you'd expect it to do against some Abyss shields. It's definitely acceptable damage, but I expected a bit more. His Claymore, on the other hand, does quite a bit to their shields, or at least more than you would expect from straight physical damage. Lastly is Dvalin. It was a very quick and easy one-phase fight, and soon after, Act 3 is complete. Now we need to get to AR 23 to start Liyue. The first thing I did was go to Fontaine using the teleport waypoints that we unlocked by reaching AR 18 and fight our boss. His boss is the Icewind Suite, or as I call them, I wish I had what they had. The Nemesis Capellius version of the fight is what gives us his boss drop. We don't need his boss drops until AR 25, but it's best to just get it out of the way earlier. On my first attempt I ended up dying to them because I wasn't used to their attacks and they attacked really fast once I got their shield. What I learned to do is just avoid attacks when they have their shield, which makes this fight 10 times easier. I also need to get Vermintide flowers, and at the time I didn't know how many were underwater, so I had others use Hydro on them so I could collect them. Don't worry, I didn't do this again afterwards. Also, before anyone says that I broke the rules by using co-op, that wasn't the rule, it was no fighting enemies in co-op. I genuinely get told that I broke the rules by using co-op on every video because some people don't pay attention to the rules. I explored Fontaine for a bit when someone playing as Lynette joined me. One thing led to another and we ended up roleplaying for an hour and a half. I returned to Mondstadt for a bit to do my commissions and a domain, which gave us a poll.
4-star, good Claymore, Freminet. Why do I keep getting these Claymores? What is happening? This is like the opposite of D-Luke only, where I got like 1 Claymore by wishing.
Favonius Greatsword is a perfectly acceptable upgrade over Debate Club, and definitely better than Rain Slasher. But we won't be using it for very long because we're going to Dragonspine. This place is one of the best places to get a lot of experience and Primo Gems, but who cares about those when we have the perfect weapon for this challenge? Snow Tomb Star Silver. It's a craftable weapon that gives us physical damage, but the best part is that after interacting with 8 of these stone tablets, we can get a free one. The only caveat to that being that to reach some of them, we have to raise the Skyfrost Nail, which means we have to destroy all 3 ice shards. I don't really mind doing this because it's not very hard and it gives us a lot of experience. On the first day of Dragonspine exploration, I left about an hour and 20 minutes in to do Spiral Abyss. What did we get from Spiral Abyss?
Are you?
My name's Dia.
I am haunted
what you got
by
me?
Dia.
A commission, a fight,
Ugh.
escort?
Dia really wants her solo challenge, doesn't she? The next day I returned to finish raising the Skyfrost Nail and Dragonspine. And of course...
Hey, I like Kaya, so... And Cryo, so close enough. Welcome home, Freminet.
First we get an early pity Dia, and then a character that you can only get on standard banner. My luck only works when it doesn't help me. Somehow I forgot to get Snowtomb's Star Silver, which was a dumb lapse in judgment. I started exploring Liyue, still not having the Claymore. I did some world quests, opened some teleport waypoints and statues, collected Geoculi, and opened chests. It's worth mentioning that I've already long since reached AR 23, but I wanted to go to AR 25, which is when you unlock Act 2. I wanted to plow through Act 1 and Act 2, and then be closer to unlocking Act 3, which you unlock at AR 28. I even went to Chinksa Village to do the Chi of Your world quest, still not having the weapon. After a lot more chest hunting and quest completion, I reached AR 25 and ascended Freminet to level 50. I haven't mentioned his passive talents because in all honesty, they're not very helpful. His first one shortens his cooldown a bit, but I feel its effects will rarely come into play. His second passive talent makes it so if you trigger Shatter, it'll increase your elemental skill's damage, which will happen even less. His last one decreases aquatic stamina consumption, which is a pretty standard Fontaine passive, but ironically enough, I spent more time underwater in this challenge than any of my other challenges. Makes sense because I'm using the Diver character. Oh yeah, and for reaching AR 25, we unlocked a certain free character.
Pleased to make your acquaintance.
Sister!
Yes, that was very important to mention. Then finally, after all this time, I got Snowtomb's Star Silver. I probably felt dumb to forget about it for so long, and rightfully so, because this is a great weapon for Freminet. After leveling it to level 50, I started the Ascension domain. With this weapon, Freminet's already easily hitting over 2,000 damage, which makes me very excited for the numbers he'll hit in the future. Now we can finally start Act 1. The male archon that doesn't get confused for a female but was one in the past dies, and the Lord Harbinger tells us to inform the Adepti about his death. It may not be Father telling us to do it, but you still have to listen to a Harbinger. First is Mooncarver, and here we have to fight against the mill of the soldiers, or as I call them, Grunt.mp3. Mooncarver gives us a buff that increases our energy recharge, which made it so we pretty much had infinite elemental skills. Next was Mountain Shaper, and here we have to save this guy's brother from the Amber. I may be mistaken, but I think they may have made it so this guy's brother is always found in this piece of amber. The past few times that I've done this quest for challenges, he's always been in that piece of amber. I'm gonna have to test this on the next challenge. Next is Cloud Retainer, who we made food for before skipping her domain by jumping off a tree. Last is Zhao, which includes a fight with a Ruin Hunter. Normally Ruin Hunters are more difficult than Ruin Guards, but because it had less physical resistance, it's even easier. That's where Act 1 ends, and before we started Act 2, we did Diluc's story quest only because it's required to be able to do Dainsleif's quest, We Will Be Reunited. Right after completing Diluc's story quest, it's right back to Liyue's Archon quest. We meet the male Archon that doesn't get confused for a female but was one in the past, and we go to Mondstadt to boil some rocks. Freminet is kinda stupidly strong at this point in the challenge, and because of how few flaws I have with this kit, he feels fun and strong to play in my opinion. So far, he might have one of my favorite solo performances of any character I've used, including characters like Diluc and Zhongli. Not the easiest, but a lot of fun and not mindless damage like with Zhongli and to a lesser degree Layla. Next was Granny's Teapot, which had a bunch of slimes. All of them are easy, including the cryo ones because, as I've said multiple times, Freminet is a physical attacker. Way later we meet an honorary cryo physical damage dealer, and she tells us to go to the Guizhong Ballista. There we find some treasure hoarders, which weren't difficult at all, but they still found a way to make the fight annoying. Soon after we go out to eat with the male Archon that's, you get it, who is also a fellow honorary physical damage dealer. That's where Act 2 ends, and now we need to get to AR 28 to start Act 3. Thankfully my plan of reaching AR 25 to make AR grinding easier worked, because we're already AR 27. All we had to do was some Dragonspine exploration, some domains that give us Shrine of Depths keys that we use, finding our boss, Lisa's story quest, and one leyline to reach AR 28. Now time for Act 3. Our sister helps us with the animal mechanism, and then we fight the Millilith at the Guizhong Ballista. Thankfully these guys weren't able to trick me off the platform like the treasure hoarders, and they were just as easy as the treasure hoarders. Later we sing to some flowers, which causes 3 Whopper flowers to appear out of the ground. That'll definitely do good things for Freminet's already low self-esteem. Once again, these were more cryo enemies made easy because of how we attack. Next was the Lord Harbinger Child. There's no way we can beat a Harbinger. We're just a child of the House of the Hearth. What do we do? Oh, that was really easy. Never mind. Last is Osile, and I definitely forgot this fight was coming, or was distracted because I died on my first attempt because I was AFK.
Their attacks are unrelenting.
Once I actually fought it, it was obviously easy. That's the end of Liyue Act 3. Now we need to get to AR 30 to start Inazuma, and we also need to do both the Dainsleif World Quest and Archon Quest. The Dainsleif World Quest is short and pretty easy. In We Will Be Reunited, we get the first big instance of Freminet's attack speed hindering him. It left him very open to attacks, which made him lose half of his HP in this fight with a Ruin Hunter and 2 Abyss Mages. But hey, it could have been worse. Remember this fight in No Mora? I wish I didn't. Also, the final fight with the Hydro Abyss Herald and 2 Abyss Mages almost took 3 minutes, and we took a lot of damage. We were knocked from full HP to red HP by the end of the fight, so I'll definitely need to work on playing it safe and dodging more while using Freminet. With that done, we need to get to AR 30. Thankfully, I already got all the boss drops and Romaritime flowers I need to ascend. A few weekly bosses and ley lines are enough to get us to AR 30, which means we can ascend both Freminet and Snow Tomb Star Silver. My artifacts are still just 4-piece Berserker because it's a pretty good early artifact set, but I'll probably be replacing it for a certain physical artifact set soon. I decided to get the recipe for condensed resin after this to make grinding things in the domains easier in the future, particularly the artifacts. Now we can do the Inazuma prologue quest, which only had treasure hoarders and slimes. We deal so much damage at this point that the only way for us to lose fights is to enter the fight with low HP and get hit by a random left field attack, or for them to have us fall to our death. Neither happened here, so it was just easy. With the demo done, we can experience the real deal in Inazuma Act 1. The start of Act 1 is spent all in Rito, and we don't get our first combat part until the transport mission. Most of the enemies were treasure hoarders except for 3 Ronin who were just as easy. Also, I think I might have started the treasure hoarder space program in this fight. Skipping way later into the Archon quest, we have to break into the police detention center to save someone while fighting the Tamriel mission. While they did deal quite a bit of damage to me, they were all quickly taken down. That's the end of Act 1, and the game forces us to complete Ayaka's and Yoimiya's story quest. Both of them aren't very interesting, so let's skip to Act 2, which starts with fighting the Raiden Shogun. But would you consider standing there letting her hit you until she triggers the end of the fight, fighting? I don't think so. After that, I decided to start grinding for 2-piece Pale Flame. It increases our physical damage bonus by 25%, and it's a good substitute for a 4-star physical goblet, which I haven't gotten. After about 40 minutes, I have some decent artifacts that I put on my Freminet. I'll probably come back to this domain later to get more artifacts, and hopefully ones that are a bit better. We show the Virgin what a real soldier should look like with the power of our new artifacts, and then go to the Resistance camp to do some archery demonstration. But Freminet is not a bow character, so we let the Pyro Archer, named Amber, do it for us. At the front lines, we fight more Tamriel Commission soldiers, and sending them to fight Freminet one-on-one was pretty much a death sentence. Now Act 3. First are some Ronin bordering Watatsumi Island, who didn't stand a chance against our boy. Later we have to trigger some Electro Pillars, which are not Freminet compatible, so we use Fischl to trigger them. This makes an Electro Lawatral spawn, and even though we couldn't freeze it despite it being in the rain because of its Electro Shield, it went down fast. Tepe does what he should have done way earlier, which is die, and now time for the Delusion Factory. Take a guess as to how long this took. There are 3 groups of 3 enemies and 1 group of 2 enemies, making it 11 enemies in this domain. Do you have your guess? Here's the answer. Less than 3 minutes. Freminet plowed through this domain, probably forgetting that he's taking out other Fatui members. We meet another Lord Harbinger at the end of this domain, and then meet Yaimiko. She takes us to the anti-Raiden Shogun training, which was changed this update. How much was it changed? Like 3 tiny things, so who cares. After that, we meet...
Is that another underrated 4-star? It's Sayu!
And then fight some Tamriel Commission soldiers in a stupidly easy battle. In the last phase, there were like 5 other Tamriel Commission soldiers that would spawn to slow down the fight against Freminet and the big boy soldier, but they affected so little in this fight. Before fighting another Lord Harbinger, Signora, I grinded just a bit of talent materials, and these were our talents before fighting Signora. I've always thought that Signora was an easy boss, but in this challenge Freminet made it look like he was fighting a slime. In phase 2, once you get her at or below 25% HP, she'll do a tornado move. Never on any of my accounts has someone defeated her before she's managed to get that move out, which makes sense because of how little time she gives you to hit her. But Freminet? She can I wrote she in the script. He can slow her down with cryo, and because of his crazy damage, defeat her before she gets that attack out.
That was the first time I ever beat her without her doing the tornado move. Freminet is fucking strong. Oh my god.
This has taught me a lesson to not sleep on cryo claymore users. I learned that with Chongyun long ago, and now I'm learning that with Freminet. But when's Eula's time to shine? Last is a second Raiden fight, and just look at this clip.
It's out 13k!
I think Freminet might as well try fight the Tsaritsa. That's the end of Inazuma Act 3. Now we need to reach Air 35 to start Sumeru, and we need to do the Dainsleif Chasm quest. Before doing any of that, I need to get Freminet's ascension materials because reaching Air 35 allows us to ascend Freminet again. His boss is still easy to get, the maritime flowers aren't really that bad, but the enemy drops are always a pain to get. The best place to farm them is underwater, and depending on where you are, you either have a good power to deal with them, or an awful power. Farming these on my main account for Neuvillette was not fun, and it's the same here. After doing that for what felt like forever but was really about an hour and a half, we can start the Dainsleif Chasm quest. If there's one thing that Freminet struggles against, it's Abyss enemies. All of them are good at hitting him with his long attack animations, and he really doesn't do that much to any of their shields. Of all the elements to deal with Abyss shields, Cryo is probably the worst one, even worse than Geo. It doesn't do much to all of them except Hydro, and even then it's not great against it. After 16 minutes from the first Abyss enemy to the last one, we defeated all of them, which means we completed the Dainsleif Chasm quest. Because we're already Air 35, we can start Sumeru Act 1 immediately. Act 1 starts with us clearing out a withering zone with a few hydro fungi. Most of them were in the water, which gave us a free freeze. In the Dream Domain, we fight some Hilichurls, and I realized bigger enemies like the Minotaur definitely aren't the free KOs that they used to be, but small enemies still are. After that, we go to Sumeru City to get our Akasha terminals, and then go to Port Ormos and meet Alhaitham. He has us buy some knowledge capsules, and we test one of them on some fungi. Oh my god, I didn't write Dory's name. That's just disrespect to Dory. These fights weren't even fair. Last are some Eremites, who were just about as easy as the fungi. Next is Act 2, which has only one easy bit of combat against more Eremites. So on to Act 3. We meet
the Doctor,
and then fight more Eremites in the forest. I never realized that you have 3 Eremite fights in a row in the span of 3 Archon quests. We learn about the other short male with a sad past, and later we fight some Rift Hounds in the desert. Despite their weird resistance to every element, it was easy. Act 4 time. We start by fighting more Eremites, and these were the easiest ones so far. Because they're so spread out, you can focus all of your attacks on one at a time. Next is the Elazar Hospital, which had a group of Hilichurls and a Geolauchurl. Before fighting them, I started a new space program.
Everywhere.
empty and forgotten. An ideal place.
What happened to that guy?
My main concern is the Geolauchurl because of its 50% physical resistance. It really wasn't that bad, but if he managed to hit me, it might have gone differently. For the Dendropillars, I did a trick where I grabbed a Dendrogram and quickly teleported and ran to where the Dendropillars were. This was the first time I was able to do it successfully since Xingqiu only 5 months ago. Way later, we can do the King Deshret domain. We could skip a lot of the enemies in here, and we only had to fight 2 groups of fungi. Both of them are easy, even the one with 2 flying Dendrofungi and 2 big Hydrofungi, which normally gives me a bit of problems. Last is Act 5. This quest starts with how most Sumeru Archon quests do, with an Eremite fight. We had helpers for this one, but Freminet didn't let any of them get a kill because of how strong he is. At Party's DI, we have to fend off some Fatui soldiers, and I find it weird that this is the first time we fight them in the Sumeru Archon quests. Maybe they could have given us more variety instead of having us fight Eremites a bunch. All of them were taken down quickly except for the agent, who stuck around and almost killed Freminet. Just think about what Father would have done to that agent if he did kill Freminet. A whole bunch of plot later and we go into the Deej Foundry, which is filled with Fatui soldiers. The only ones in there that could have caused problems were the Cryo Gun guy, who we were able to skip, and the Cryo Chiseed Mage, who I made sure to attack as fast and aggressively as possible so she didn't get her shield. Lastly is Scaramouche. In Phase 1 we literally didn't even have to move, but in Phase 2 we couldn't take down their Nirvana engines, but that was okay because we could sacrifice Nahida to the one-shot move. Besides, we all know that Freminet could have destroyed him if he was stunned. Last for Act 5 is the polluted domain. First were 3 Rift Hounds, which we very quickly turned into 1 Rift Hound. The big Rift Hound was tanky and moved around quite a bit, but we really couldn't have lost against it. Last were the hilly trolls on the boat, and because of the stupid summon troll triggering burning on us, we died against the Electro Lava troll. Next attempt he killed me again and threw me off the boat to add insult to injury. On the next attempt, he threw himself off the boat, which only slowed down the fight even more, even if it was a little funny. Finally, I was able to take it down after probably one of the most annoying fights I've ever done in Genshin. Thankfully, that's the end of Sumeru Act 5. Now we need to reach AR 40 to start Fontaine, and we need to get our Ascension materials. Luckily for his enemy drops, it only took about 20 minutes of grinding to get them.
Alright, this is probably going to be the last wish I do for this challenge, so... end us off with a bang? Maybe?
Here's the Academia's
You're not
distinguished
even
scholar
remotely,
award. This is
like,
Sumeru's
affiliated with
Life Award.
Freminet. Get out of here.
And
Next, I decided to go back to Pale Flame farming. The artifacts I have now are okay, but I know they can be much better. After about 30 minutes of grinding, I managed to increase my crit ratio from 19.8 and 76.7 crit ratio to 50.5 and 102.9, which is a vast improvement. After that, I grinded for our boss drops, and after getting them all, I realized I almost forgot to do Karibert. Karibert is the next Dainsleif quest, and ever since Inazuma, you need to do the Dainsleif quest to continue the story. That would have been awkward. The only important fight in this quest is the Cryo Abyss Herald, and because we're a physical attacker, we did better against the Cryo Herald than the Hydra Herald. Physical characters are weird. After that, I took some Maritime Flowers from other people's worlds, so now all we need to do is reach AR 40. I started by doing a bunch of domains in Liyue that give us both experience and shrine keys, which gives us more experience. After doing all of them and unlocking all Liyue shrines, we only need 800 more experience. After completing a Liyue story quest I forgot to do earlier and opening a chest, we reach AR 40. Now all that's left to do is complete Fontaine. We meet... oh my god, Lyney and Lynette? Freminet missed you two so much! At Romaritime Harbor, we need to get Romaritime Flowers for Lyney and Lynette. And apparently the ones I'm beginning aren't good enough because these ones are fibery Romaritime Flowers, so I had to use a hydrogram to collect them. In the Court of Fontaine, we meet our boy, and also meet back up with the Lord Harbinger child, who takes this fight for us. Later, Lyney and Lynette get put on trial, but because we're a good brother, we successfully defend them in court. Next is Act 2. We spend a lot of this Archon quest investigating with Navia, which leads us going into this underwater domain. And here are a bunch of Garda-mechs, which just so happen to be Osea aligned. Remember when I said it would be helpful for Fontaine? What our Numa does to these enemies is make it so they can't use elemental attacks, and you can only really understand how helpful that is if you do it yourself. That's the end of Act 2, and now it's time for Acts 3 and 4, which is spent almost entirely in the Fortress of Meripede with no combat. So let's move on to Act 5. First is the Tower Domain, and most of this domain is pretty much just a warm-up for the last fight of the domain, a Ruined Garden 2 Rogues. I always die in this room, and I fully expected Freminet to die at least once. But Freminet keeps on surprising me. He didn't even get knocked to red HP by the end of the fight, and I think I've decided that of all the solo challenges I've done, Freminet has done the best overall. He hasn't been the easiest one because of how often he gets hit and how he's died a few times, but he has struggled with almost nothing since the start, maybe besides some Abyss Mages and that fucking Electro Lotral. Later in the Archon quest, we put Freminet on trial for not being the Hydra Archon.
I know him!
And long story short, this led to us fighting 2 Hydra Garda-mechs, which were also Osea aligned. They're just making it too easy at this point. Speaking of too easy, now we need to fight the all-devouring Narwhal. In the Shadow phase, we didn't even need Nivelette's help to take down his shield because Freminet already has Numa. That's the end of Fontaine Act 5, and also where this challenge ends. That means we beat Genshin Impact using only Freminet. Honestly, he did way better than I expected. He didn't have healing or shielding, which is what most good solo characters have, but he still outperformed multiple other characters. Unlike my other Cryo character solo challenge, Freminet excelled with his damage, and he probably holds a damage record for my challenge at 13k. But if you don't count that fight because we were buffed during that fight, he still dealt upwards of 6 to 7k by the end of the challenge. On the tier list of difficulty, this goes below Diluc only, and on the solo tier list, I'm placing him at the top. He did everything very well, and definitively proved that yes, you can build any character to be good, at least in my opinion. My next challenge will either be healers only, which I've been streaming for the past 2 months, or another solo challenge. Which one? I was thinking maybe Yao Yao only, or Diona only. Kaveh only? Sucrose only? I have a lot of options. But until one of those happen, I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, I finished editing this video while I'm sick and my head is pounding and my throat hurts and I'm super fucking cold. Yeah!